Extraterrestrial warlords looked at our vibrant blue oceans and lush green continents and laughed, calling Earth a soft cradle that bred only weaklings. To prove their absolute superiority, their elite vanguard demanded a surface landing to dictate our surrender. Unfortunately for them, they chose December and they chose Alaska. Humanity held its collective breath as the alien armada blotted out the stars. For 6 months, the Vraxian Dominion had systematically dismantled the outer system mining colonies. First went the autonomous extraction rigs on Enceladus, followed swiftly by the orbital habitats around Mars. Earth's defense forces, heavily reliant on experimental Lockheed Martin railgun platforms and retrofitted United Nations spacecraft, were woefully outgunned. The Vraxians did not just conquer, they humiliated. Their vessels were massive, jagged monoliths of dark alloy, built to withstand the chaotic, magma-spewing environment of their homeworld, Vrax Prime. Inside the deep underground bunkers of NORAD in Colorado, the mood was incredibly grim. Secretary of Defense Arthur Hayes stood at the center of the command floor, his eyes fixed on the massive digital displays tracking the Armada's descent into high Earth orbit. Beside him, lead UN negotiator Simon Croft adjusted his glasses, sweat beading on his forehead despite the bunker's heavy air conditioning. They were about to initiate the first direct visual communication with the Vraxian Fleet Master, a being known as Corin. The main screen flickered, replacing the tactical map of the globe with the imposing visage of Fleet Master Corin. The alien was a towering figure clad in hardened, calcified armor that looked like obsidian, with deep crimson eyes set into a harsh, angular face. His mandibles twitched in what the human linguistic software translated as a gesture of supreme condescension. Leaders of Earth, Corin's voice boomed through the speakers, digitized and translated into flawless English by the Dominion's superior algorithms. I have observed your world for 3 of your planetary rotations. I have studied your history, your biology, and your climate. I am utterly underwhelmed. Simon Croft leaned closer to the microphone. Fleet Master Corin, we are prepared to discuss the terms of a ceasefire. We recognize the superiority of your orbital weaponry. However, a ground invasion will result in catastrophic losses for both sides. Corin let out a sound that resembled grinding stones. A Vraxian laugh. Catastrophic losses? Do not flatter yourselves, human. You evolved on a paradise. A fragile terrarium of liquid water, gentle breezes, and stable tectonic plates. My species was forged in the great magma plains of Vrax Prime, where the surface temperature boils the weak and the sky rains ash. Your planet is too soft. It has made your species weak, complacent, and uniquely unsuited for the rigors of true galactic warfare. General Hayes crossed his arms, his jaw set. With all due respect, Fleet Master, Earth has its own extremes. Do not mistake our stable orbit for a lack of bite. Do not attempt to deceive me with your pathetic posturing, Corin sneered. We have scanned your biosphere. We see your vast unfrozen oceans. We see your green landmasses. There is no true hardship here. You possess no natural armor, no thermal-resistant plating on your skin. You are soft meat wrapped in cloth. To demonstrate the absolute futility of your resistance, I will not accept your surrender from orbit. I will bring my Vanguard elite to your surface. We will plant the Dominion banner on your soil, and you will bow before us in person. Croft and Hayes exchanged a quick, tense glance. If you insist on a surface meeting, Croft said carefully, we can arrange a landing zone in the Mojave Desert or perhaps an airstrip in Nevada. We have diplomatic facilities. I do not require your facilities, Corin interrupted, his eyes flashing with irritation. I will not be guided to a heavily fortified trap of your choosing. I have already selected the coordinates. Instantly, his breath crystallized, turning into a cloud of sparkling ice that blew back into his face. Forward! He tried to yell, but his vocal cords, paralyzed by the sudden, shocking inhalation of -45°F air, produced only a weak, rasping click. His soldiers attempted to follow his order. They marched down the ramp, their heavy boots sinking into the deep snow. But within 20 paces, the catastrophic reality of their situation set in. The cooling fluids running through their sophisticated combat armor, designed to prevent overheating, began to freeze. The fluid turned viscous, then solid. Alien soldiers suddenly found their joints locking up. They pushed against their own suits, their synthetic muscles straining against the frozen hydraulics, but the ice was unyielding. A Vraxian heavy gunner raised his plasma rifle, intending to fire a warning shot into the sky to demonstrate their power. He pulled the trigger. The extreme cold had contracted the internal firing chamber. The plasma cell ignited, but the frozen barrel ruptured instantly, shattering the weapon into a dozen pieces and knocking the alien backward into a snowdrift. Panic, a completely foreign emotion to the Vanguard elite, began to spread. They were shivering violently, a biological response they had never experienced and did not understand. Several soldiers collapsed, their internal temperatures dropping to critical levels. The vaunted conquerors of the stars were curling into fetal positions in the snow, desperately trying to conserve heat that was rapidly vanishing into the merciless Alaskan wind. From the warmth of his Oshkosh command vehicle, General Hayes watched the thermal imaging screens. The bright red signatures of the aliens were rapidly dimming to yellow, then to a sickly green. "Unbelievable," Croft whispered over the secure comms line. "They're freezing to death. They haven't even fired a shot." "Deploy the mechanized infantry," Hayes ordered calmly. "Form a perimeter. Have the medical teams ready with the thermal blankets. We're not going to let them die, but we are going to make them wait." The heavy doors of the human armored vehicles swung open. Out stepped the Earth soldiers. To the freezing, terrified Vraxians, the humans looked like absolute monsters. They walked smoothly through the deep snow, seemingly immune to the death wind that was tearing the aliens apart. The humans didn't slip. Their spiked boots gripped the ice perfectly. They didn't freeze. Their thick, insulated gear trapped their mammalian body heat. General Hayes stepped out of his vehicle, flanked by 4 towering soldiers carrying conventional kinetic assault rifles, weapons that functioned flawlessly in the bitter cold. He walked across the tundra, the crunch of his boots sounding like thunder to the aliens. He approached Fleet Master Corrin. The mighty alien warlord was on his knees, his arms wrapped around his shivering torso, ice forming on his mandibles and across his crimson eyes. His once imposing obsidian armor was coated in a thick layer of frost. Hayes looked down at him, his face completely obscured by his thermal mask and goggles. He reached up and slowly pulled down the balaclava, exposing his face to the freezing wind. He didn't flinch. "Welcome to Earth, Fleet Master," Hayes said, his voice steady and calm, carrying over the howling wind. "We brought the treaties. Are you ready to sign?" Frost formed thick and heavy on the obsidian armor of the alien warlord. Fleet Master Corrin, conqueror of 3 star systems and terror of the Orion Cygnus arm, could not stop his mandibles from violently chattering. He looked up at General Arthur Hayes, trying to find some hint of mockery or cruelty in the human's eyes, but there was only cold, calculated professionalism. "Medical teams deploy." Hayes's voice cracked over the external loudspeakers of the Oshkosh defense vehicles. "Get those 3M heavy-duty Mylar thermal blankets on them immediately. Use the portable General Dynamics atmospheric heaters. We need to raise their core temperatures, or we're going to have 500 dead diplomats on our hands." Human medics poured out of the armored personnel carriers. They were clad in white and gray camouflage, moving with practiced efficiency through the knee-deep snow. To the Vraxians, whose vision was blurring as their ocular fluids began to thicken, these humans looked like phantoms of the ice. The medics rushed from one fallen alien to the next, wrapping the massive armored bodies in specialized reflective thermal sheets, initially designed for high-altitude rescue operations on Mount Everest. Dr. Amelia Brooks, the chief medical officer for the Arctic deployment, dropped to her knees beside Subcommander Vell, Corrin's second-in-command. The alien was curled into a tight ball, his dark armor completely frosted over. "His core temperature is dropping exponentially," Brooks shouted into her comms unit, pulling a high-grade thermal pack from her kit and cracking it to activate the chemical reaction. She shoved it into the gap between the alien's neck armor and his biological carapace. "These creatures have 0 internal thermoregulation. It's like they're cold-blooded, but worse. They rely entirely on their environment and their suits have completely failed. Two burly infantrymen grabbed Fleet Master Corrin by the shoulders. His legs were completely locked, the hydraulic fluid in his knee joints having frozen solid. They half-carried, half-dragged the towering alien warlord toward the lead command vehicle. Corrin tried to resist, pride demanding he fight back, but his muscles were utterly unresponsive. He was a prisoner in his own freezing body. They hauled him into the back of the heavily modified command center. The heavy reinforced doors slammed shut, cutting off the deafening howl of the polar vortex. Instantly, the environment changed. The interior was heavily insulated and aggressively heated. The sudden influx of 70 degrees Fahrenheit air hit Corrin's frozen biology like a physical blow. Condensation immediately began to pour off his armor, forming small puddles on the steel floor grate. General Hayes stepped inside a moment later, pulling off his frosted balaclava and shaking the snow from his heavy parka. He walked over to a small field desk, poured a fresh cup of coffee from a stainless steel thermos, and sat down across from the shivering fleet master. Simon Croft, the UN negotiator, sat beside Hayes, opening a durable Panasonic Toughbook laptop. "Welcome to the soft cradle, Fleet Master," Croft said quietly, his tone devoid of gloating, though the absolute dominance of the situation was clear. "I believe we have a treaty to discuss." Corrin slumped on the heavy steel bench, his chest heaving as his internal temperature slowly began to rise. He looked around the cabin, his crimson eyes wide with a mixture of horror and profound confusion. "How?" he rasped, his vocal cords finally thawing enough to produce human speech through his translator. "How do you survive this? This is a death zone. The atmosphere itself is a weapon." Hayes took a slow sip of his black coffee. "Earth is a beautiful, vibrant world, Corrin, but she is also ruthless. You scanned our green continents and our liquid oceans and assumed we had it easy. You assumed our evolution was a gentle stroll through paradise." The general leaned forward, his eyes locking onto the alien. "What your scans didn't tell you is that our planet operates on extremes. This death zone you're sitting in covers a massive portion of our globe for half the year. And this isn't even the coldest it gets. Down in Antarctica, the temperatures drop so low that carbon dioxide freezes out of the air." Corrin's mandibles twitched in disbelief. "No species can evolve in such chaos without heavy biological plating or geothermal adaptation." "We didn't adapt biologically," Croft interjected, tapping the screen of his laptop. "We adapted intellectually. We survived multiple ice ages, periods where glaciers miles thick covered entire continents. We didn't have fusion cores or thermal armor back then. We survived using animal furs, fire, and sheer stubborn willpower. We are an apex predator forged not by magma, but by ice, fire, storms, and floods." The realization hit Corrin like a kinetic strike. The Vraxian Dominion had conquered worlds by relying on their natural biological superiority and overwhelming firepower. They had never encountered a species that routinely and voluntarily inhabited environments that were actively lethal. "Your armor," Corrin wheezed, gesturing weakly toward Hayes's parka. "It does not generate heat. It only traps it. You generate the heat yourselves." "Mammalian biology," Dr. Brooks noted as she stepped into the cabin, wiping sweat from her brow. She had just finished stabilizing the last of the Vanguard elite outside. "We burn calories to keep our internal furnaces running. We are walking, talking thermal engines, and right now we are the only reason your Vanguard hasn't shattered into a million frozen pieces." Hayes set his coffee down. "So let's talk terms. You demanded our unconditional surrender. You wanted us to bow in the snow. From where I'm sitting, your elite soldiers are currently wrapped in human-made thermal blankets, drinking human-made heated rations, and crying for their mothers. I think the terms of this negotiation have shifted." Corrin looked at the floor. The supreme arrogance that had fueled the Vraxian campaign was gone, replaced by the chilling reality of Earth's true nature. "If I do not report back to the fleet in orbit," Corrin said slowly, "they will assume a trap. They will begin the orbital bombardment." "Let them try," Hayes countered, a grim smile playing on his lips, because the moment they fire, they expose their thermal vents. And if they enter our atmosphere to ensure targeting accuracy, the cold will do to their dreadnoughts exactly what it did to your dropships. Your fleet is paralyzed, Corin. Now you are going to open a direct channel to your flagship. You are going to tell them exactly what happened here. High above the churning atmosphere of Earth, the Vraxian dreadnought Ignis hung in the silent vacuum of space. The massive command deck was a hive of tense activity. Sub-Admiral Zealer paced the command bridge, his heavy metallic boots clanking against the heated grates of the floor. The ambient temperature on the bridge was a blistering 110 degrees Fahrenheit, a comfortable resting state for the volcanic species. Still no telemetry from the Vanguard, the chief communications officer reported, his talons rapidly dancing across the obsidian control consoles. Their atmospheric entry was nominal, but upon touchdown, all thermal signatures flatlined. It is as if they were swallowed by a localized entropy field. Zealer stopped pacing, his crimson eyes narrowing as he glared at the holographic projection of the blue and white planet below. An entropy field? Nonsense. The humans do not possess such technology. They rely on primitive kinetic weapons and crude fission reactors. Run the scans again. Focus on the landing coordinates. Scanning now, Sub-Admiral, the tactical officer replied. A moment later, a complex web of data populated the main screen. Atmospheric conditions at the landing site are anomalous. The local temperature is currently registering at 230 degrees below our biological baseline. The wind velocity is sufficient to strip thermal plating. Zealer stared at the data, his mind struggling to comprehend the numbers. 230 degrees below? That is impossible. Liquid water covers 70% of this planet. Such temperatures would freeze the oceans solid. Only the polar regions exhibit these extremes, Sub-Admiral, the science officer. Officer interjected, his voice trembling slightly. The planet possesses a highly unstable axial tilt and chaotic atmospheric currents. It is a world of fractured, violent biomes. The humans, they deliberately lured the fleet master into a frozen wasteland. Before Tsar could process the sheer tactical audacity of the humans, the main communication array flared to life. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. It is a localized signal originating from the human surface forces, utilizing a heavily encrypted channel bounced off multiple primitive satellites. The signature matches a human corporation known as Lockheed Martin. Put it on screen, Tsar barked. The massive holographic display shifted, replacing the planetary map with the interior of a brightly lit, utilitarian room. Sitting at a metal desk was a human clad in heavy fabric layers. Beside him sat Fleet Master Corin. A collective gasp echoed across the Vraxian command deck. The Fleet Master was stripped of his outer combat armor. He was wrapped in strange silver reflective sheets, and a human medical device was strapped to his chest, pumping warm fluids into his circulatory system. Corin looked diminished, broken, and shivering. Sub-Admiral Zalar. Corin's voice echoed through the bridge, sounding weak and raspy. I am transmitting this message under my own authority. You are to stand down all weapon systems immediately. Cancel the orbital bombardment protocols. Tsar slammed his fist onto the console. Fleet Master, what have they done to you? Have they employed biological weapons? Neurotoxins? No, Corin replied heavily, closing his eyes. They employed the weather. The environment at these coordinates is lethal to our biology. The Vanguard elite was neutralized in less than 5 minutes without a single kinetic shot being fired. Our armor locked up, our weapons shattered. The humans, they walked through the freezing death as if it were a mild breeze. They saved us from freezing to death using their own emergency equipment. The human sitting next to Corin leaned forward. The translation software identified him as General Arthur Hayes. Sub-Admiral, Hayes spoke, his voice projecting utter confidence. Your ground forces are entirely in our custody. Your dropships are currently microfracturing in the negative 70-degree wind chill. If you attempt an atmospheric rescue, your ships will suffer catastrophic thermal shock. If you attempt an orbital strike, our Space Force, utilizing kinetic railgun platforms provided by Raytheon and Boeing, will intercept your ordnance. You are outmatched, outstrategized, and entirely out of your element. Zallar bared his mandibles in a vicious snarl. You bluff, human. We can glass your entire continent from orbit. Your primitive railguns cannot stop a concentrated plasma barrage. Perhaps, Hayes replied coolly, but we've tracked your fleet's thermal signatures. Your ships run incredibly hot. To fire a concentrated barrage, you must open your primary heat sinks. If you do that in low Earth orbit, the residual atmospheric drag and our localized defense grids will target those vents. You might take out a city, but we will destroy your entire fleet. Is it worth losing the pride of the Dominion to an ape in a snowstorm? Zallar hesitated. The tactical displays confirmed the humans' assessment. The Vraxian ships were designed to fight in deep space or above scorching worlds. Operating in the delicate, temperature-sensitive threshold of Earth's upper atmosphere while trying to vent massive amounts of plasma heat was incredibly risky. Furthermore, Croft, the UN negotiator, leaned into the camera frame. We have the fleet master and 500 of your most elite warriors. Earth is prepared to offer a cessation of hostilities. We will return your soldiers thawed and alive. In exchange, the Vraxian Dominion will withdraw from the Sol system entirely and sign a treaty of non-aggression. If you refuse, we will leave the Vanguard out in the snow, and we will broadcast their frozen demise to every species in the Orion Cygnus arm. Zallar looked at Corrin. The fleet master gave a slow, defeated nod. The mighty Vraxian military, a force that had shattered planetary defense grids and enslaved entire species, had been brought to its knees by frozen water and wind. Zallar forced the words out, the humiliation burning hotter than his home world's magma fields. We accept your terms. The fleet will hold position and await the transfer of our personnel. We will withdraw. The screen went black, cutting the transmission. Silence reigned on the command deck of the Ignis. The galactic paradigm had just violently shifted. Humanity had not won through superior lasers or impenetrable shields. They had won because they were the chaotic children of a brutal, unforgiving world. The aliens had mocked Earth as a soft cradle, but they had learned a devastating lesson. Earth was not a cradle. It was a crucible. Blizzards continued to batter the Alaskan coastline as the logistical nightmare of the prisoner transfer began. Moving 500 incapacitated, heavily armored alien warriors through a negative 50-degree wind chill required a masterclass in human engineering and brute force. General Arthur Hayes watched from the command center as massive winterized Caterpillar D-11 bulldozers and specialized Oshkosh transport trucks rolled across the frozen tundra, cutting paths through the deep snowdrifts. The United States Air Force deployed heavy-lift Sikorsky Sich-53K King Stallion helicopters, their massive rotors violently whipping the snow into blinding vortices as they hovered above the extraction zones. The roaring engines of human machinery echoed like a victory chant against the howling wind. Inside the makeshift medical tents, constructed using advanced dual-layer synthetic canvas and heated by industrial General Electric portable furnaces, the Vraxian Vanguard elite experienced the slow, humiliating process of thawing out. Dr. Amelia Brooks walked the aisles between the heavy cots, checking the vitals of the extraterrestrial soldiers. They had shed their obsidian combat armor, revealing their true forms, towering insectoid reptilian hybrids with thick ash-colored carapaces. Despite their terrifying appearance, they huddled under heavy synthetic down blankets, clutching standard-issue military thermal flasks filled with hot, sugary tea. Subcommander Vell watched Dr. Brooks approach, his crimson eyes tracking her every movement. He had been taught that humans were soft, fragile sacks of water who panicked at the slightest discomfort. Yet this female human was calmly walking through an environment that had nearly killed his entire battalion, wearing nothing but a specialized North Face heavy parka and a confident expression. Your core temperature is stabilizing, Subcommander, Brooks said, reading the output on her handheld medical tablet. Your biological fluids have fully returned to a liquid state. You should regain full motor function within the hour. However, your joints will experience severe micro-tearing if you exert yourselves too quickly. Vel chittered, his mandibles clicking slowly. You do not fear us. We came to enslave your species, burn your cities, and claim your resources. Yet you pour warm fluids down our throats and monitor our internal heat. Why do you not let us perish in the ice? We are professionals, Brooks replied evenly, checking the 4-line that was feeding warm saline into his arm. On Earth, the cold is a far greater enemy than any army. We don't let people freeze to death if we can help it, even invaders. Besides, dead prisoners don't sign treaties, and a frozen corpse doesn't tell a very convincing story to the rest of the galaxy. Outside, the Vraxian dropships remained in the ice. The catastrophic thermal shock had completely compromised their hulls. They were useless husks of frozen metal, rapidly becoming permanent monuments to alien arrogance. To extract the prisoners, the Vraxian dreadnought Ignis had to deploy heavily modified orbital shuttles, retrofitted on the fly with improvised thermal shielding. Sub-Admiral Zalar had swallowed his immense pride and accepted human technical schematics transmitted via secure channels from NASA engineers in Houston to ensure the shuttles wouldn't shatter upon entering the polar vortex. Within the Oshkosh command vehicle, Fleet Master Corrin prepared to sign the treaty. Simon Croft slid the heavy parchment across the steel table along with a high-end Montblanc fountain pen. The treaty was uncompromising. The Vraxian Dominion would immediately vacate the Sol system, dismantle their mining outposts on the outer planets, and publicly recognize Earth as a sovereign, restricted territory. Corrin stared at the document. He picked up the pen, his massive clawed hand dwarfing the delicate human instrument. My species has never signed a surrender, he stated, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. We have never been defeated in open combat. There is a first time for everything, General Hayes replied, leaning casually against the reinforced bulkhead. Consider it a lesson in planetary humility. You judged a book by its cover. You saw our blue oceans, our green forests, and thought we were weak. You forgot that water, when angry, can crush steel, and when frozen, can stop a galactic armada dead in its tracks. Corrin carefully signed his name in a jagged, aggressive script. He pushed the paper back to Croft. The Galactic Council will not believe this. They will say the Dominion grew tired of your system or that the mineral resources were not worth the fuel expenditure. Let them spin whatever diplomatic lies they want, Croft replied, a sharp edge entering his voice. We have the telemetry. We have the high-definition recordings of your elite vanguard shivering in the snow, relying on human charity to survive a winter afternoon. We will broadcast it to every sector in the Orion Cygnus arm. The galaxy will know exactly what happens when you land on Earth uninvited. Your aura of invincibility is broken. 2 hours later, the retrofitted Vraxian shuttles descended through the brutal blizzard. They landed carefully, their engines whining in protest against the biting cold, venting exhaust that instantly turned to heavy ice fog. The transfer was orderly, silent, and deeply humiliating for the aliens. The Vanguard elite, once the terror of the cosmos, shuffled up the boarding ramps wrapped in gray, human-made blankets, carrying their thermoses. They looked back at the human soldiers standing tall in the snow, their kinetic rifles slung casually over their shoulders. The humans didn't cheer, jeer, or mock them. They simply stood there, absolute masters of their frozen domain, silently watching the invaders retreat. Corrin was the last to board. He turned at the top of the ramp, the freezing wind tearing at his cape, and locked eyes with Hayes. The alien warlord gave a slow, deliberate salute, a gesture of genuine, hard-earned respect for a species that had weaponized its own hostile biosphere. Hayes returned the salute crisply, his breath pluming thick in the freezing air. Off, violently breaking through the atmosphere and docking with the Ignis. The Vraxian fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives, tearing holes in the fabric of space as they fled the solar system in absolute defeat. They left behind a few frozen dropships, a massive pile of discarded thermal blankets, and a profound realization that would forever alter the balance of power across the stars. Earth was not a soft cradle. It was a brutal, beautiful crucible that forged the most resilient, terrifyingly adaptable creatures in the known universe. Humanity had not just defended their home. They had proven that the universe's ultimate apex predator was an unyielding spirit of resilience and defiance. The stars belonged to those who could survive the storm. Thank you for experiencing this epic sci-fi HFY journey. If you loved seeing humanity use Earth's brutal winter to defeat an arrogant alien armada, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends who love science fiction stories where humans absolutely dominate. We upload thrilling new tales every week. Leave a comment below telling us which Earth environment you would use to trap an alien invasion next. Hi, my name is Tran Trung, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, your planet is too soft. The aliens mocked, then they landed on Earth during winter HFY. I'd really like to know what you think. How did the story make you feel? For me, the strongest feeling was quiet satisfaction. It's always interesting to see confidence challenged by reality, especially when patience and adaptability matter more than raw power. This story reminded me that judging others too quickly can lead to surprising mistakes. And sometimes the greatest strength is simply knowing how to thrive where you are. Which moment stood out to you the most? The aliens' first encounter with Earth's winter, or the calm way humanity handled the situation? If you were in that position, what part of Earth's environment do you think would be the biggest surprise for an unfamiliar visitor? One small lesson we can take into everyday life is to stay humble and never underestimate people or situations we don't fully understand. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy HFY adventures like this, feel free to like the video or subscribe to Palace Truths for more stories.